Maria Chen wiped down the last table in the corner of the Sterling Room restaurant. Her feet hurt. They always hurt after a long shift. She had been standing and walking for 8 hours straight, carrying heavy trays of food and drinks to customers who barely looked at her face. To them, she was just the waitress. Just another person bringing their meals. Nobody special. She glanced at the big clock on the wall. It was almost 11 at night. Just 30 more minutes and she could go home to her small apartment. She could take off these uncomfortable black shoes and rest her tired feet. Maybe she would eat some leftover pasta and watch something mindless on television before falling asleep. That was her routine now. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Day after day, week after week. Maria was 26 years old, but sometimes she felt much older. Life had a way of making you grow up fast, she thought. 7 years ago, when she was 19, her life had looked completely different. Back then she had dreams. Big dreams. She was going to be a concert pianist. She was going to travel the world and play beautiful music in famous halls. People would come from everywhere to hear her play. That was the plan. She remembered the day she got accepted to the Anderson Conservatory of Music. It was one of the best music schools in the country. They only accepted 30 students each year out of thousands who applied. Maria had won a big piano competition when she was 18, and that victory had opened doors for her. The conservatory offered her a full scholarship. Everything was paid for. Her mother had cried tears of joy that day. Her daughter was going to make it. She was going to be somebody. Maria started at the conservatory in the fall right after her 19th birthday. Those first few months were magical. She practiced for hours every day on beautiful grand pianos. Her teachers were amazing musicians who had performed all over the world. They saw potential in her. They pushed her to be better, to dig deeper into the music, to find her own voice at the piano. She made friends with other students who loved music as much as she did. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Then everything changed. It was the middle of her second year at school. Maria was practicing late one night when her phone rang. It was her aunt. Her mother had collapsed at work. They had taken her to the hospital. Maria should come right away. She grabbed her coat and ran out of the practice room, her heart pounding with fear. At the hospital, the doctors told them the news. Cancer. Her mother had cancer, and it had already spread. They needed to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation, possibly surgery. The doctors talked about treatment plans and survival rates, but all Maria could hear was the fear in her mother's voice when she asked, "How much is this going to cost?" Maria's mother worked as a secretary at a law firm. She had basic health insurance, but it did not cover everything. The bills started coming fast. Co-pays for doctor visits, medications that cost hundreds of dollars, special treatments that insurance would not pay for. Maria watched the numbers climb higher and higher. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Her mother kept saying she would figure it out, but Maria could see the worry in her eyes. Maria tried to stay in school. She really tried. She went to her classes and practiced when she could, but her mind was always somewhere else. She thought about her mother lying in a hospital bed. She thought about the bills piling up on the kitchen table. She could not focus on Chopin or Beethoven when her mother was fighting for her life. After 2 months, Maria made a decision. She went to the dean's office and told them she was leaving school. The dean tried to convince her to stay. They could work something out, he said. Maybe she could take a semester off and come back later. But Maria knew the truth. Her mother needed her. More importantly, her mother needed money for treatment. The only way Maria could help was to work full-time. She found a job at the Sterling Room 3 days after leaving school. It was an upscale restaurant in the city, the kind of place where business people had meetings over expensive steaks and wine. They needed a waitress who could work evening shifts. The pay was not great, but the tips could be good if you smiled a lot and made customers feel special. Maria had no experience as a waitress, but the manager, a stern man named Dennis, decided to give her a chance. Those first few weeks were hard. Maria dropped plates. She forgot orders. She mixed up which table ordered what. The other waitresses were not very friendly. They saw her as competition for the good tables, the ones with customers who tipped well. Dennis yelled at her almost every day. He told her to move faster, smile more, pay attention. She wanted to quit so many times, but every time she thought about leaving, she remembered why she was there. Her mother needed her. Slowly, Maria got better at the job. She learned how to balance 3 plates on one arm. She memorized the menu so she could answer questions without looking anything up. She figured out which customers wanted to chat and which ones wanted to be left alone. She learned to read people's moods and adjust her approach. The tips got better. Dennis stopped yelling at her quite so much. But every single day as she walked through the dining room with her trays of food, Maria saw it. The piano. It sat in the corner of the main dining room, a beautiful black Steinway grand piano. The lid was always open, showing the strings inside. The keys were perfect, gleaming white and black. The restaurant had bought it years ago to make the place look more elegant and sophisticated. Sometimes they hired a pianist to play during special events, but most nights the piano just sat there, silent and alone. Maria tried not to look at it. Every time she walked past that piano, something inside her chest hurt. It reminded her of everything she had lost. It reminded her of late nights in the practice rooms at school, her fingers flying over the keys, lost in the music. It reminded her of her teachers telling her she had real talent, that she could make it if she worked hard enough. It reminded her of dreams that now seemed impossible. She had a piano in her apartment, an old upright that her mother had bought for her when she was 8 years old. It was the piano she had learned on, practiced on for hours every day as a child. When she left school, Maria had tried to keep playing. She thought maybe she could practice at home and somehow keep her skills sharp, but every time she sat down at that piano, she felt angry. Angry at life for being so unfair. Angry at herself for leaving school. The music that used to bring her joy now just made her sad. After a few months, she stopped playing altogether. She covered the piano with a sheet and tried to forget it was there. Music belonged to her old life, the life she could not have anymore. This was her life now, carrying plates, forcing smiles, counting tips. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself that once her mother got better and the bills were paid off, she could go back to school. She could pick up where she left off. But as the months turned into years, that story became harder to believe. Her mother's treatment went on and on. Just when they thought they were done, the doctors would find something else. More tests, more treatments, more bills. Maria worked double shifts whenever she could. She saved every penny that did not go to rent or food or her mother's medical expenses, but the debt kept growing faster than she could pay it down. The other waitresses at the restaurant had lives outside of work. They talked about their boyfriends, their weekend plans, their families. Maria listened but rarely shared anything about herself. What would she say? That she spent her days off taking her mother to chemotherapy appointments? That she had not been on a date in 3 years? That she used to have dreams of being a concert pianist, but now she just dreamed of paying off medical bills? There was one waitress named Sophie who tried to be friendly. Sophie was a few years older than Maria and had been working at the Sterling Room for 5 years. She had started waitressing to pay her way through nursing school. Now she was a registered nurse but still picked up shifts at the restaurant on weekends to make extra money. Sophie understood what it was like to work hard for something that mattered. One slow Tuesday afternoon, Sophie and Maria were folding napkins in the back room. Sophie looked at Maria and said, "You seem sad all the time. Are you okay?" Maria was surprised by the direct question. She thought about lying, about saying everything was fine. But something about Sophie's kind face made her want to tell the truth. Maria told Sophie about her mother, about leaving music school, about the debt that never seemed to get smaller no matter how hard she worked. Sophie listened without interrupting. When Maria finished talking, Sophie reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's really hard," Sophie said simply. "I'm sorry you're going through that." It was such a small gesture, but it meant everything to Maria. For so long, she had felt completely alone in her struggle. Nobody at the restaurant knew her real story. To them, she was just another waitress who needed a job. But Sophie saw her, really saw her. After that day, Sophie and Maria became friends. They took their breaks together. Sophie told Maria stories about crazy things that happened at the hospital where she worked. Maria told Sophie about the difficult customers who complained about everything. They laughed together about Dennis and his ridiculous rules about how napkins should be folded and how many times they should check on each table. Sophie knew about Maria's piano background. One day she asked Maria if she ever played anymore. Maria shook her head. "I can't," she said. "It hurts too much." Sophie nodded like she understood. "Maybe someday," she said. "When you're ready." Years passed. Maria turned 24, then 25, then 26. Her mother's condition improved slowly. The cancer went into remission, which meant it was under control but could come back. The doctors wanted to keep monitoring her closely. That meant more appointments, more tests, more bills. But at least her mother was alive. That was what mattered most. Maria became one of the senior waitresses at the Sterling Room. She trained new employees. She handled the difficult customers that others did not want to deal with. Dennis actually started to respect her. She was reliable, he said. She did her job well and never caused drama. It was not much of a compliment, but coming from Dennis, it was something. The restaurant hosted a lot of business dinners and corporate events. Maria served hundreds of businessmen in expensive suits who talked about deals and money and mergers. They barely noticed her as she refilled their water glasses and brought them their meals. She was part of the background, like the fancy wallpaper or the paintings on the walls, or like the piano that sat silent in the corner. Sometimes late at night, after all the customers had left and the other staff had gone home, Maria would stand next to that piano. She would touch the smooth wood, let her fingers hover over the keys without pressing them down. She remembered what it felt like to play, the weight of the keys under her fingers, the way different pressures created different sounds, the feeling of losing herself completely in the music, of becoming part of something bigger than herself. But she never played, not once in 7 years. She had made her choice. She had given up music to save her mother. That was the trade she had made, and she could not take it back. Some doors once closed could not be opened again, or at least that was what she told herself. Maria did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that one ordinary Tuesday evening would turn into the most extraordinary night of her life. She did not know that sometimes the universe has a way of bringing you back to exactly what you need, even when you have given up all hope. All she knew was that her feet hurt, her shift was almost over, and tomorrow she would do it all again. That was enough. That had to be enough. She wiped down the last table, checked that the salt and pepper shakers were full, and got ready to go home. Just another day at the Sterling Room, nothing special, nothing unusual. Or so she thought. Tuesday started like any other day for Maria. She woke up at 10 in the morning after getting home late from her shift the night before. She made herself toast and coffee in her tiny kitchen. The apartment was quiet. Her mother had moved in with Maria's aunt last year, which made it easier for both of them. The aunt could help with appointments and medication, and Maria did not have to worry as much when she worked late nights. Maria ate her breakfast looking out the small window that faced a brick wall. Not much of a view, but the apartment was cheap and close to the restaurant. That was all that mattered. She checked her phone. There was a text from her mother asking how she was doing. Maria sent back a quick reply saying she was fine. Everything was good. She did not mention how tired she felt. Her mother worried enough already. At 3 in the afternoon, Maria got ready for work. She put on her black pants and white button-up shirt. She tied her long dark hair back in a neat bun. She applied just a little makeup, enough to look fresh and professional. Dennis was very particular about appearance. The waitresses at the Sterling Room had to look elegant and put together at all times, he said. They represented the restaurant's image. Maria arrived at the restaurant at 4. The evening shift started at 4:30, but she liked to come early. It gave her time to check her section, make sure everything was ready before customers started arriving. The Sterling Room was beautiful in the afternoon light. Sun came through the tall windows, making everything glow. The white tablecloths looked crisp and clean. The silverware sparkled. Fresh flowers sat in the center of each table. Sophie was already there, setting up her section on the other side of the dining room. She waved at Maria and smiled. "Hey, you ready for tonight?" she called out. Maria walked over. "What's happening tonight?" she asked. Sophie's eyes got wide. "You didn't hear? Dennis is freaking out. We have a huge private event. The whole main dining room is reserved for one party." Maria felt a little knot form in her stomach. Private events could be good or bad. Good because the tip was usually guaranteed, added automatically to the bill. Bad because rich people at private events could be demanding and difficult. "What kind of event?" Maria asked. Sophie leaned in closer and lowered her voice even though they were the only ones in the dining room. "Some kind of big business dinner. Dennis said it's really important. 2 CEOs meeting about a merger or something. He told us we have to be perfect tonight. No mistakes." Just then, Dennis came out from the back office. He was a thin man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that noticed everything. He always wore a perfectly pressed suit and moved through the restaurant like a general inspecting his troops. When he saw Maria and Sophie, he clapped his hands twice. "Ladies, come here, please." Maria and Sophie walked over to where Dennis stood near the piano. He had a clipboard in his hand and was looking at it with a serious expression. "Tonight is extremely important," he began. "We are hosting executives from 2 major technology companies. They are finalizing a merger worth over $1 billion. $1 billion. Do you understand what that means?" Maria and Sophie nodded, though Maria was not entirely sure what a merger was. Something about companies joining together, she thought. Dennis continued. "These are very powerful, very wealthy men. They have high expectations. The company is paying us $50,000 just to host this dinner. That is more than we usually make in a week. We cannot mess this up. $50,000 for one dinner?" Maria could hardly believe it. That was almost a year's worth of her wages. She tried to imagine having that kind of money to spend on a single meal. Dennis kept talking. "Maria, you will be the lead server. Sophie, you will assist her. There will be about 12 people total, 2 teams, 6 people each. They want a 5-course meal. The menu has been specially prepared by Chef Robert. You will need to coordinate timing perfectly. Each course should come out exactly when I tell you. Not a minute early, not a minute late. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Maria and Sophie said together. Dennis looked at his clipboard again. "They are arriving at 7. I want you both ready at 6:30. Understand the menu completely. Know every ingredient in every dish in case someone has allergies or questions. Be invisible but attentive. Anticipate their needs before they ask. And for God's sake, do not drop anything." Maria felt the pressure building. She had done plenty of important dinners before, but never anything quite like this. $1 billion deal. She could not even imagine that much money. Dennis walked away to check on the kitchen, leaving Maria and Sophie standing by the piano. Sophie looked at Maria and made a funny face. "No pressure, right?" she whispered. Maria laughed nervously. "Yeah, no pressure at all." For the next 2 hours, Maria and Sophie prepared. They reviewed the menu that Chef Robert had created. The first course was a delicate soup made from roasted butternut squash with cream and herbs. The second course was a salad with special greens, candied pecans, and some kind of cheese Maria had never heard of. The third course was seared scallops on a bed of risotto. The fourth course, the main course, was a choice between filet mignon or Chilean sea bass. The final course was a trio of small desserts including chocolate mousse, creme brulee, and a berry tart. Maria's mouth watered just reading about it. She never got to eat food like this. The staff meal at the end of the night was usually whatever the kitchen had left over, which was rarely anything fancy. She and Sophie set up the tables exactly how Dennis wanted them. They folded the napkins into perfect shapes. They polished every fork and knife until there were no fingerprints. They filled water glasses with ice and fresh lemon slices. At 6:30, Maria stood at the edge of the dining room and took a deep breath. Everything looked perfect. The lighting had been adjusted to create a warm, intimate atmosphere. Soft instrumental music played quietly through the speakers. The tables were arranged in the center of the room with space between them. Maria noticed that instead of one long table, there were 2 separate tables facing each other. That was unusual, she thought. But maybe that was how important business people like to meet. At 7 o'clock exactly, the guests began to arrive. Maria watched from her position near the kitchen door. She could tell immediately which group was which. The first group to enter was led by a tall man with silver hair. He wore an expensive-looking dark suit and moved with confidence. Behind him came 5 other people, 3 men and 2 women, all carrying briefcases and looking very serious. They took their seats at the table on the left side of the room. 5 minutes later, the second group arrived. The leader of this group was shorter, Asian, maybe in his 60s. He had gray hair and wore glasses. His suit was also expensive but more conservative in style. His group also included 5 people. They sat at the table on the right side of the room. Maria noticed something immediately. The 2 groups did not greet each other warmly. There were polite nods, formal handshakes, but no smiles. No friendly conversation. The energy in the room felt cold and stiff. Dennis appeared beside Maria. "That is James Whitmore," he whispered, pointing to the tall, silver-haired man. "He founded Whitmore Technologies 30 years ago, worth about $3 billion. And that," he pointed to the Asian man, "is Akira Tanaka, He is the CEO of Tanaka Industries, also a billionaire. They have been negotiating this merger for 18 months. Tonight they are supposed to sign the final papers and celebrate. Maria looked at the two tables. It did not look like a celebration. It looked more like two armies meeting under a truce flag. She could feel the tension from across the room. Dennis patted her shoulder. "All right, go serve the wine. And Maria, be perfect." Maria picked up the first bottle of wine from the bar. It was a red wine that cost $400 a bottle. She had nearly dropped it when she first saw the price. $400 for wine. That was more than her rent. She approached Mr. Whitmore's table first. "Good evening, gentlemen and ladies," she said with her best professional smile. "May I pour you some wine this evening?" Mr. Whitmore barely looked at her. "Yes, please," he said, his attention focused on some papers in front of him. Maria carefully poured wine into his glass, then moved around the table, serving the others. They were talking in low voices about stock values and board approval and other terms Maria did not really understand. She finished with that table and moved to Mr. Tanaka's table. "Good evening," Maria said again. "May I offer you some wine?" Mr. Tanaka looked up at her, and for a brief moment their eyes met. There was something sad in his expression, Maria thought. He nodded politely. "Yes, thank you," he said with a slight accent. His English was perfect, but clearly not his first language. Maria poured the wine for his table as well. They were also talking business, but more quietly. She caught words like tradition and respect and concern. Maria retreated to the kitchen to get the first course. Chef Robert had the soup ready, each bowl perfectly presented with a small swirl of cream on top and a sprig of fresh herbs. "This needs to go out now while it's hot," he said. Maria and Sophie each took a tray with 6 bowls. They moved smoothly through the dining room, placing a bowl in front of each guest. "Roasted butternut squash soup with herbs and cream," Maria announced softly. "Please enjoy." She noticed that while she served, the talking had stopped. The two tables were silent, everyone looking down at their soup. This was definitely not a celebration, Maria thought. Something was wrong. As she walked back to the kitchen, she heard Mr. Whitmore say to one of his lawyers, "If they cannot agree to our terms, there is no point in continuing this." Over the next hour, Maria and Sophie served course after course. The salad, the scallops. Each time Maria entered the dining room, the atmosphere felt worse. The guests barely touched their food. They were not enjoying the expensive meal that had been prepared. Instead, people kept having whispered conversations with the person next to them. Papers were being passed back and forth. People were shaking their heads. During the main course, Maria heard one of the women at Mr. Whitmore's table say, "We have made too many compromises already. We cannot give up our company's identity." At Mr. Tanaka's table, a man was saying, "They do not understand our way of doing business. This will never work." Maria looked at Sophie, who looked back at her with worried eyes. Whatever this billion-dollar deal was, it was falling apart right in front of them. Dennis stood in the corner of the room, his face pale. He could feel it, too. These important guests were not happy. The dinner was not going well, and there was nothing he could do about it. As Maria cleared the main course dishes, most of the food had barely been eaten. All those beautiful, expensive dishes wasted. She felt bad for Chef Robert, who had worked so hard on the menu. But more than that, she felt the heavy tension in the room. It was like a thick fog that made it hard to breathe. She was carrying a tray of dirty dishes back to the kitchen when she heard Mr. Tanaka speak to his assistant in a voice that was not quite a whisper. "There is no point in staying for dessert," he said. "We clearly do not understand each other. This merger was a mistake. We should have trusted our instincts from the beginning." Maria's heart sank. They were going to leave. All of this was going to fall apart. 18 months of work, whatever that meant. $1 billion. All of it ending in this cold, silent dining room. She pushed through the kitchen door and set down her tray. Sophie came in right behind her. "This is bad," Sophie whispered. "They hate each other." Dennis came rushing into the kitchen, his face now red instead of pale. He was angry and panicked at the same time. "This is a disaster," he said. "Mr. Whitmore's assistant just told me they are going to leave before dessert. $50,000 for a failed dinner. The owner is going to kill me. Our reputation will be ruined." Then Dennis looked at Maria. "Mr. Whitmore just asked me if we have any live music. He said maybe some music would lighten the mood, give them a chance to calm down and think. But our pianist is out of town. He's performing in Boston this week. We have nothing." Dennis ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Maria had never seen him make before. He always looked so controlled. Now he looked desperate. "Just get dessert out there as fast as you can," Dennis said. "Maybe if we serve them something sweet, they will stay a few minutes longer. Maybe they can work things out. I don't know. Just do your best." He walked away, muttering to himself about bad luck and terrible timing. Maria stood in the kitchen holding an empty tray. Through the door, she could see the dining room. She could see the 2 tables of unhappy people. She could see the lawyers shuffling papers, preparing to pack up and leave. She could see Mr. Tanaka saying something to his team. She could see Mr. Whitmore shaking his head. And she could see the piano. The beautiful black Steinway grand piano that had sat silent in the corner for 7 years. The piano she walked past every single day without touching. The piano that reminded her of everything she had lost, everything she had given up. Sophie touched Maria's arm. "Come on, we need to serve dessert," she said gently. Maria nodded. She helped Sophie load a tray with the small desserts that Chef Robert had prepared. They each took a tray and walked back into the dining room. The tension had gotten even worse, if that was possible. One of the lawyers at Mr. Whitmore's table was actually putting papers back into his briefcase. Maria placed the dessert trio in front of each guest. "Chocolate mousse, creme brulee, and berry tart," she said. "Prepared fresh by our chef." No one was listening. No one cared about dessert. Mr. Tanaka stood up from his chair. His whole team stood up with him. "I apologize," Mr. Tanaka said to Mr. Whitmore. "But I think it is best if we end this evening now. Clearly, we have fundamental differences that cannot be resolved. Thank you for your time." Maria stood frozen near the kitchen door. She watched Mr. Tanaka and his team begin to gather their things. 18 months of work. $1 billion. All of it disappearing right now, right in front of her eyes. She did not know these people. She did not understand their business. But she understood failure. She understood what it felt like to watch your dreams fall apart and not be able to stop it. Something inside her chest began to hurt. It was the same feeling she got when she walked past the piano each day. That ache of loss, that weight of giving up. She had been carrying it for 7 years, pushing it down, trying to ignore it. But tonight, watching these strangers lose something important to them, something inside Maria cracked open. Her feet began to move. She was not thinking clearly. She was not thinking at all, really. She set down her tray on an empty table. Dennis was going to yell at her for this. She was breaking all the rules. Waitresses were supposed to be invisible. They were not supposed to draw attention to themselves. They were definitely not supposed to touch the expensive piano that cost more than they made in a year. But Maria's feet kept moving. She walked across the dining room toward the piano in the corner. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Mr. Whitmore looked confused. Mr. Tanaka had stopped packing his briefcase and was staring at her. Sophie's mouth was open in shock. Dennis looked like he might faint. Maria reached the piano. She pulled out the bench and sat down. Her hands were shaking as she lifted them toward the keys. 7 years. It had been 7 years since she had played a piano. 7 years since she had let herself feel the music. 7 years since she had been anything other than a tired waitress just trying to survive. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The entire room was silent, waiting to see what this crazy waitress was going to do. Maria's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands shook above the piano keys. What was she doing? This was insane. She was a waitress. She was supposed to be clearing tables, not sitting at the piano in front of a room full of billionaires and their lawyers. Dennis was probably already thinking about how to fire her. She should stand up right now, apologize, and go back to work. But she did not stand up. Instead, her fingers slowly lowered and touched the keys. The feeling was familiar and strange at the same time. She had not felt these smooth keys under her fingers in so long. 7 years. 7 years of walking past pianos, of covering up her own piano at home, of pretending that part of her life was over and done. The room was completely silent. Everyone was staring at her. Maria closed her eyes. She could not look at them. If she looked at their faces, at their confused expressions, she would lose her courage and run away. So she kept her eyes closed and tried to remember. What should she play? Her mind was blank with panic for a moment. Then, like a voice from far away, she remembered something her mother used to sing to her when she was little. It was a Japanese song called Sakura Sakura. Her mother had sung it in Japanese, which Maria did not speak, but the melody was burned into her memory. It was a song about cherry blossoms, her mother had explained, about how beautiful they are when they bloom, but also how quickly they fall. It was a song about beauty and sadness mixed together, about things that do not last forever. Maria pressed the first key. The note rang out clear and pure in the silent room. Then the second note. Then the third. The melody began to flow from her fingers. It was slow and gentle, like her mother's voice singing her to sleep all those years ago. Maria played it simply at first, just the basic melody. Each note hung in the air for a moment before the next one came. As she played, something strange began to happen. Her hands started to remember things her brain had forgotten. Her fingers knew where to go without her having to think about it. They curved naturally over the keys. They knew how much pressure to use, how to make the notes sing. It was like riding a bicycle after many years of not riding. The body remembers even when the mind forgets. Maria could feel the tension beginning to leave her shoulders. For 7 years she had been so tight, so closed up inside, working and worrying, taking care of her mother, counting money, barely sleeping. She had forgotten what it felt like to just breathe and let something flow through her. But the music was flowing now. It was pouring out of some deep place inside her that she had locked away. She played through the melody once, twice. On the third time through, her hands began to add small changes. A little decoration here, a different note there. Her music training was coming back. She remembered her teacher at the conservatory telling her, "Music is not just about playing the notes on the page. It is about making the notes your own, adding your voice to the conversation." The simple Japanese melody began to shift and change. Maria's left hand started adding a rhythm underneath, a gentle jazz rhythm that made the old song feel new. Her right hand began to improvise around the melody, dancing above and below it. She was not thinking anymore. She was just playing, just letting the music go where it wanted to go. The melody of Sakura Sakura started to blend into something else. Maria did not plan it. It just happened. The Japanese folk song began to merge with a piece by George Gershwin called Rhapsody in Blue. It was a famous American jazz piece that she had learned years ago. The two melodies should not have fit together. One was ancient and Eastern, the other was modern and Western. But somehow under Maria's fingers they started to talk to each other. The Japanese melody would sing for a while, gentle and traditional. Then the Gershwin jazz would answer, bold and energetic. Back and forth they went, like two people having a conversation. Sometimes they agreed, playing together in harmony. Sometimes they disagreed, creating tension and dissonance. But they were always listening to each other, always responding. Maria could feel tears starting behind her closed eyes, but she did not stop playing. She played all the frustration of the last 7 years, the anger she felt when she had to leave school, the fear when her mother was sick, the loneliness of working job after job with no end in sight, the grief of giving up her dreams. But she also played the strength she had found, the determination, the love for her mother that made all the sacrifice worthwhile, the small moments of beauty she had found even in the hard times. Her hands moved faster now, more confident. The music grew louder, more passionate. The Japanese melody and the American jazz were weaving together into something completely new. Neither one was losing its identity. The Japanese song was still recognizable as itself. The Gershwin was still clearly Gershwin. But together they created something that was more beautiful than either one alone. Maria thought about the word her music theory teacher had used. Once, synthesis. It meant taking two different things and combining them to create something new, not just mixing them together, but letting them transform each other. The Japanese melody was teaching the jazz to be more patient and thoughtful. The jazz was teaching the Japanese melody to be more free and expressive. They were learning from each other. The music built to a climax, both melodies singing together now, loud and powerful. Then gradually Maria brought the volume back down. The melodies separated again, each going their own way but carrying something of the other with them. The Gershwin had picked up some of the gentle quality of Sakura. The Japanese melody had gained some of the jazz's confident swing. Finally, Maria brought the piece to an end. She played the opening notes of Sakura one last time, very soft and slow like a memory fading. The last note hung in the air. She lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. She sat very still, her eyes still closed. The room was completely silent. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Maria was afraid to open her eyes. What had she just done? She had probably just gotten herself fired. Dennis was going to be furious. She had interrupted an important business dinner to play a random piano piece that nobody asked for. What had she been thinking? She had not been thinking. That was the problem. Then Maria heard a sound. Someone was standing up. She opened her eyes and turned around on the piano bench. Mr. Tanaka was standing at his table. There were tears running down his face. He was looking at Maria with an expression she could not quite read. Sadness and joy mixed together. Recognition, like he had just understood something important. Then Mr. Tanaka began to clap. Slowly at first, his hands coming together in steady, deliberate applause. Mr. Whitmore stood up next. He was also clapping. Then everyone else in the room stood up. All 12 of the important business people in their expensive suits. All the lawyers and executives. Sophie in the corner. Even Dennis looking shocked but also moved. Everyone was standing and clapping for Maria, the waitress who had broken all the rules. Maria stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaking. She did not know what to do. She had never performed for an audience like this. In school she had done recitals, but that was different. This was unexpected. This was breaking out of her place. She felt completely exposed and vulnerable. She wanted to run to the kitchen and hide, but Mr. Tanaka was walking toward her. He came across the dining room, still clapping, tears still on his cheeks. When he reached Maria, he stopped clapping and just looked at her for a moment. "What is your name?" he asked softly. His voice was kind. "Maria," she said. Maria Chen," he repeated. "That was extraordinary. Do you know what you just did?" Maria shook her head. She had no idea what she had just done except probably get herself fired. Mr. Tanaka smiled. "You showed us what we have been trying to do for 18 months. You showed us in 5 minutes what we could not understand in a year and a half." Maria looked at him confused. Mr. Tanaka turned to look at Mr. Whitmore, who had also walked over. "Did you hear it?" Mr. Tanaka asked him. "Did you hear what she played?" Mr. Whitmore nodded slowly. "I heard it," he said. His voice was thoughtful. She played 2 completely different pieces of music. One Japanese, one American. They should not have fit together. But they did. Mr. Tanaka turned back to Maria. "You played Sakura Sakura, a very old Japanese folk song. My grandmother used to sing it to me. And you played Gershwin, American jazz. 2 completely different traditions. Different cultures. Different ways of thinking about music. But you made them talk to each other. You made them dance together. And neither one lost what made it special." Mr. Whitmore stepped closer. "The Japanese melody never disappeared," he said, like he was realizing something as he spoke. "It was always there, but it was transformed by the jazz. It became something new while still being itself. And the jazz became something more beautiful and complex by embracing the traditional structure of the folk song." Maria stood between these 2 powerful men, still not entirely understanding what was happening. Mr. Tanaka looked at Mr. Whitmore. "That is what we have been trying to do," he said. "Merge our 2 companies. But we have been fighting about who has to give up what, who has to change, who has to compromise. We have been so afraid of losing our identity that we forgot why we wanted to merge in the first place." Mr. Whitmore nodded. "I have been so focused on making sure my company stays dominant that we keep control. I was not thinking about what we could create together. I was thinking about what I might lose." He paused. "But this young woman just showed us something different. She showed us that 2 very different things can come together and make something better than either one alone, without destroying what makes each one special." Mr. Tanaka wiped his eyes. "In Japan we have a concept called wei. It means harmony, but not the harmony where everyone is the same. It is the harmony where different voices come together and create something beautiful, precisely because they are different. That is what I heard in your music, Maria. True harmony." Maria felt like she was dreaming. These billionaires were standing in front of her, talking about her improvised piano piece like it was profound and meaningful. She had just been playing what she felt. She had not been trying to teach them anything. She had just been letting out 7 years of bottled-up emotions. But somehow, accidentally, she had shown them exactly what they needed to see. Mr. Whitmore turned to his team. "Let's sit back down," he said. His voice was different now, softer, more open. "I think we need to start this conversation over. With a different approach." Mr. Tanaka nodded and gestured to his team. "Yes, let us sit together this time. Not at separate tables like enemies, like partners trying to create something new." The 12 business people began to rearrange themselves. Instead of sitting at two separate tables facing each other like opponents, they pulled chairs over to one long table. They mixed together, alternating between the two companies. Maria watched in amazement. 5 minutes ago, these people had been about to walk away from each other forever. Now they were sitting down together, actually talking to each other like human beings. Dennis appeared at Maria's elbow. She expected him to be angry, to tell her she was fired, but instead he looked stunned. "I don't know what just happened," he whispered, "but whatever it was, I think you just saved $1 billion deal." He paused. "Also, you can play the piano like that, and you've been hiding it for 7 years. We could have been paying you to perform." Sophie came over and hugged Maria tight. "That was incredible," she whispered in Maria's ear. "I had no idea you could play like that. You're amazing." Maria hugged her back, still feeling like she was in some kind of dream. None of this felt real. How had playing a piano piece changed anything? But somehow it had. Music had done what 18 months of negotiations could not do. It had helped people see each other differently. Mr. Tanaka called Maria over to the table where everyone was now sitting. "Maria, would you please stay for a moment? I would like to say something, and I want you to hear it." Maria nodded and stood awkwardly to the side. She was still in her waitress uniform, still holding a napkin she had grabbed without thinking. She felt very out of place among all these important people in their expensive clothes. Mr. Tanaka stood up and cleared his throat. "I want to apologize to Mr. Whitmore and his team. I have been approaching this merger with fear that my company will lose its Japanese identity, fear that our traditions and our way of doing business will be swallowed up by American corporate culture. That fear has made me rigid, unable to compromise, unable to see possibilities." He looked at Maria. "But this young woman just reminded me of something important. In music, when two different styles come together, they do not destroy each other. They can make each other better. The jazz did not kill the Japanese folk song. It gave it new life, new possibilities, and the folk song gave the jazz more depth and meaning." Mr. Whitmore stood up too. "I also need to apologize. I have been approaching this merger like a conquest, like my company is absorbing yours. I was so concerned with maintaining control and dominance that I was not thinking about partnership. True partnership, where both sides bring their strengths and create something neither could create alone." He turned to his team. "We need to go back to the beginning. Not back to our original positions, but back to why we wanted to do this in the first place. What drew us together? What did we think we could accomplish together?" One of the lawyers started to speak, but Mr. Whitmore held up his hand. "No, not now. We will talk about details later. Right now, I just want everyone to think about what we just witnessed, about how two very different melodies can dance together and create beauty." The businessmen and women at the table were quiet. Some of them looked moved. Others looked thoughtful. Maria could see that something had shifted in the room. The cold, hostile energy from before was gone. Now there was something warmer, something that felt like possibility. Dennis gently touched Maria's arm. "Let's give them some privacy to talk," he whispered. Maria nodded and followed him and Sophie back toward the kitchen. As they walked away, she heard the sound of voices from the table. But this time they were not arguing. They were actually talking, listening, discussing ideas. In the kitchen, Chef Robert was waiting with a curious expression. "What on earth happened out there?" he asked. "I heard piano music, then applause, then a lot of moving around." Dennis sat down on a stool looking exhausted. "I'm not entirely sure," he said. "But I think our waitress just did something extraordinary." Maria sat down too. Her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline. She had just done something completely out of character. She had broken the rules. She had drawn attention to herself. She had played the piano in front of strangers for the first time in 7 years, and somehow, incredibly, it had helped. She did not understand exactly how or why, but it had helped. For the next 3 hours, Maria, Sophie, and Dennis stayed mostly in the kitchen. They could hear voices from the dining room, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, but always engaged. The tone was completely different from the cold, hostile atmosphere at the beginning of the evening. People were actually talking to each other now, discussing, debating, but in a productive way, not an angry way. Chef Robert made coffee and brought out some simple cookies he had in the back. Maria and Sophie took these out to the table around 9 o'clock. When Maria entered the dining room, she saw something remarkable. The 12 people were no longer sitting stiffly in their seats. They were leaning forward, some of them had taken off their suit jackets. Papers were spread all over the table, but instead of people looking at papers separately, they were looking at the same papers together, pointing things out to each other, asking questions. Mr. Tanaka looked up when Maria approached with the coffee. "Ah, Maria," he said warmly. "Thank you for the coffee. We are going to be here for a while, I think." He smiled. It was a real smile, not the polite, formal smile from earlier in the evening. "We are making progress. Real progress. For the first time in 18 months, I feel like we are actually understanding each other." Maria poured coffee for everyone. As she moved around the table, she heard fragments of conversation. They were talking about combining research teams, about sharing technology, about keeping both company headquarters instead of closing one, about creating a new structure that honored both companies' cultures. These sounded like good ideas, Maria thought, though she did not really understand the details. One of the women at the table, a lawyer from Mr. Whitmore's team, said something that caught Maria's attention. "What if we think of it like music?" The lawyer said. "Each company is like a different instrument. They have their own sound, their own voice. But when they play together in an orchestra, they create something bigger than either one alone. They don't stop being themselves. A violin is still a violin even when it's playing with the cello. But together, they make a symphony." Mr. Whitmore nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. That is exactly right. We have been thinking of this as one company absorbing another. But what if we think of it as two companies creating a new symphony together?" The others around the table began to nod. Maria could see excitement on their faces now. They were building on each other's ideas instead of tearing them down. Back in the kitchen, Maria sat with Sophie and Dennis. Sophie kept looking at Maria with amazement. "I still cannot believe you can play piano like that," Sophie said. 7 years you've worked here, and you never told me you were basically a professional musician." Maria shrugged. "I'm not a professional musician. I was a music student once. That was a long time ago." "That was not the playing of an amateur," Dennis said firmly. "I have heard the pianist we hire for events. You are better than him. Much better. Why are you working as a waitress when you have talent like that?" It was a reasonable question. Maria had asked herself the same thing many times over the past 7 years. "Because my mother needed me," Maria said simply. "Because talent does not pay hospital bills. Because sometimes you have to make choices and you choose the thing that matters most." Sophie reached over and squeezed Maria's hand. She understood. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Well, I think your life might be about to change." Maria looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Dennis gestured toward the dining room. "Those men out there have more money than most people can imagine. And you just did something that impressed them. That helped them. I have a feeling they are going to want to thank you. Properly." Maria had not thought about that. She had just acted on impulse. She had not been thinking about reward or recognition. She had just been trying to release something inside herself that had been locked up for too long. But Dennis was right. Rich people often gave generous tips. Maybe she would get a few $100s. That would be nice. She could put it toward her mother's remaining medical debt. At 11:30, Mr. Whitmore appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Is Maria here?" he asked. Maria stood up quickly, smoothing down her uniform. "Yes, sir. I'm here." Mr. Whitmore smiled at her. "We are wrapping up for the evening." "We have made tremendous progress. Far more than we ever expected when we arrived tonight. Much of that is because of what you did, what you showed us." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is for you. From both Mr. Tanaka and myself. We wanted to express our gratitude." He handed the envelope to Maria. It was thick and heavy. Maria took it, feeling awkward. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind." Mr. Whitmore shook his head. "No, thank you. You gave us a gift tonight, a gift of perspective, of understanding. That is worth far more than money, but money is what we have to give." After Mr. Whitmore left, Maria stood holding the envelope. Sophie came over. "Well, open it." Maria's hands were shaking as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check. She looked at the number written on it and felt her knees go weak. $50,000. The check was made out to her for $50,000. "Oh my God," Sophie breathed, looking over Maria's shoulder. "Oh my God, Maria, that's $50,000. Maria could not speak. She just stared at the check. It was more money than she made in an entire year of working full-time. It was enough to completely pay off her mother's remaining medical debt. It was enough to change everything. There was also a note in the envelope written on expensive paper. Maria unfolded it with trembling hands. The note said, "Dear Maria, thank you for reminding us what harmony really means. You showed us that bringing different things together does not mean destroying what makes them unique. It means creating something beautiful that honors both. This merger will go forward, and it will be successful in large part because of what you taught us tonight." With deep gratitude, James Whitmore and Akira Tanaka. Maria sat down heavily on a kitchen stool. Tears started running down her face. She could not help it. 7 years. 7 years of working herself to exhaustion. 7 years of watching money go out faster than it came in. 7 years of putting her dreams on hold. And now, in one night, because she had been brave enough to sit down at a piano, everything had changed. Sophie hugged her tight. "You deserve this," Sophie whispered. "You have worked so hard for so long. You deserve something good to happen." Dennis even patted Maria's shoulder awkwardly. He was not a very emotional man, but even he seemed moved. "Congratulations," he said. "I am happy for you." The guests began to leave around midnight. Maria stood near the entrance with Dennis, saying polite goodbyes. Each person who left thanked her personally. Some shook her hand. Some just smiled and nodded. When Mr. Tanaka reached her, he stopped and looked into her eyes. "I hope you will continue with your music," he said. "The world needs more beauty in it, more harmony, people like you who can show us how to bridge differences." Mr. Whitmore was the last to leave. He paused at the door and turned back to Maria. "That song you played, the Japanese folk song. Can you tell me what it is called?" Maria found her voice. "Sakura, Sakura. It means cherry blossoms. It is a song about how beautiful things do not last forever, but that makes them even more precious while they are here." Mr. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. Beautiful things do not last forever. But maybe that is why we have to create beauty wherever we can, when we can. Thank you for creating beauty tonight, Maria. Then he left, and the restaurant was empty except for the staff. The cleanup took another hour. Maria moved through it in a daze. She washed dishes. She wiped down tables. She swept the floor, but her mind was somewhere else. She kept touching the envelope in her pocket, making sure it was real. $50,000. A new beginning. A second chance. When everything was finally clean and put away, Dennis told Maria and Sophie they could go home. "Get some rest," he said. "You both did excellent work tonight. Especially you, Maria. I will never forget this evening." Maria changed out of her uniform in the small staff bathroom. She put on her regular clothes, jeans, and a sweater. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked the same, but she felt completely different. Something inside her had woken up. Something she had thought was dead. Sophie walked out with her. They stood on the street corner in the cool night air. The city was quiet at this time of night. "What are you going to do?" Sophie asked. Maria took a deep breath. "First, I'm going to pay off my mom's medical debt. All of it tomorrow. I'm going to call the hospital and pay every last cent we owe." "And after that?" Sophie asked. Maria smiled. It was the first real smile she had felt in years. "After that, I think I am going to go back to school. I am going to finish my music degree. I am going to be a pianist. A real pianist, like I always meant to be." Sophie hugged her. "I am so happy for you. You are going to be amazing." Maria walked home through the empty streets. She felt lighter than she had in years. The weight she had been carrying was lifting. When she got to her apartment, she did not go straight to bed even though she was exhausted. Instead, she walked over to the old upright piano that had been sitting covered in the corner. She pulled off the sheet that had been covering it for so long. Dust flew into the air. The piano looked sad and neglected. It needed tuning badly. Some of the keys were probably stuck, but it was still there, still waiting. Maria sat down on the bench. She lifted her hands to the keys just like she had at the restaurant, but this time there was no fear, no hesitation. She began to play. The piano sounded terrible. It was horribly out of tune, but Maria did not care. She played Sakura Sakura again, the song that had changed everything. Then she played Gershwin. Then she played other pieces, things she remembered from school, melodies that came back to her from some deep place in her memory. Her fingers were stiff at first, but they remembered. The muscle memory was still there, waiting to be awakened. Maria played for 2 hours. Her neighbors probably hated her, playing an out-of-tune piano at 2 in the morning. But she could not stop. It was like 7 years of dammed-up music was pouring out all at once. She played everything she had felt and could not express. The grief, the frustration, the love, the exhaustion, the hope that she had almost lost but never quite let go of completely. When she finally stopped playing, her hands were sore and her back ached from sitting. But she felt more alive than she had in years. She felt like herself again. The real Maria, not the tired waitress version who had been going through the motions. She looked at the clock. It was almost 4 in the morning. She needed to sleep. But first she picked up her phone and called her mother. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep and worry. "Maria, what is wrong?" "Are you okay?" Maria realized that calling at 4 in the morning would scare her mother. "Everything is okay, Mom. Everything is more than okay. Something amazing happened tonight. I have so much to tell you. Can I come see you tomorrow?" Her mother was confused but relieved. "Of course. Come for lunch. But Maria, you are sure you are okay? You sound strange, different." Maria smiled. "I am okay, Mom. For the first time in a very long time, I am really okay. I love you. Go back to sleep. I will see you tomorrow and tell you everything." After hanging up, Maria finally got into bed. But she could not sleep. Her mind was racing with possibilities. She would pay off the medical debt tomorrow. Then she would call the Anderson Conservatory and see if she could re-enroll. Maybe they would let her back in. Maybe she had lost too much time. But she would try. She had to try. She thought about Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Whitmore, 2 powerful men who had been unable to bridge their differences until a waitress showed them something simple. Music can bring different things together. Different melodies can dance with each other. Different cultures can talk to each other. You do not have to destroy one thing to make room for another. You can have both. You can create something new that honors what came before. Maria realized that this lesson applied to her own life too. She had thought she had to give up music to take care of her mother. She had thought it was one or the other. But maybe there was a way to have both. Maybe she could be a good daughter and a musician. Maybe she did not have to choose. Maybe she could find harmony in her own life, just like she had found harmony between Sakura and Gershwin tonight. As the sun began to rise outside her window, Maria finally drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of cherry blossoms falling like snow. She dreamed of pianos and concert halls. She dreamed of her mother smiling and healthy. She dreamed of music pouring out of her hands like water, like light, like something that had been trapped for too long and was finally free. When she woke up 6 hours later, the first thing she did was look at her nightstand. The envelope was still there. She opened it again just to make sure she had not dreamed it. The check was real. $50,000 real. This was not a dream. This was her life. Her new life. The life that had started the moment she decided to stop being afraid and sit down at that piano. Maria got dressed and went to visit her mother. She brought the check with her. When her mother opened the door, Maria was smiling so big that her mother immediately asked, "What happened? Tell me everything right now." They sat down at the small kitchen table, and Maria told her the whole story. The business dinner, the failing merger, the impulse to sit at the piano, playing Sakura, the song her mother had sung to her, the billionaires standing up to applaud, the $50,000 check. Her mother cried. She held Maria's hands across the table and cried with joy and relief and pride. "My daughter," she said. "My beautiful, talented daughter. I never wanted you to give up your dreams for me. I never wanted that." Maria squeezed her mother's hands. "I know, Mom, but I would do it again. You are worth more than any dream. But now maybe I can have both. Maybe I can take care of you and follow my dreams. Maybe there is enough room in life for everything that matters." That afternoon, Maria went to the hospital billing office and paid off every cent of her mother's medical debt. The woman behind the desk looked shocked when Maria handed her a check for the full amount. "Are you sure?" the woman asked. "This is a lot of money." Maria nodded. "I am sure. More sure than I have been about anything in a long time." Walking out of that hospital, knowing that debt was gone forever, Maria felt like she was floating. The weight that had been crushing her for 7 years was gone. She was free. Her mother was free. They could breathe again. Over the next few weeks, Maria's life transformed. She called the Anderson Conservatory and explained her situation. They remembered her. Of course they remembered her. She had been one of their most promising students. The dean told her that while she could not come back mid-semester, She could re-enroll for the spring term in January. Her previous credits would still count. She would essentially be starting her third year, picking up where she had left off 7 years ago. She would be older than the other students, but that did not matter. All that mattered was that she was going back. She was finishing what she started. Maria continued working at the Sterling Room for 3 more months until the spring semester started in January. But everything felt different now. She was not working because she was trapped. She was working because she was saving money for school and preparing for her new future. Dennis was understanding about her leaving. He even seemed proud of her in his own stiff way. "I always knew you were too talented to be just a waitress," he said. "I am glad you're going back to school." Sophie threw her a goodbye party on her last night at the restaurant. The kitchen staff made a special cake. A few of the regular customers who had gotten to know Maria over the years came by to wish her well. It was bittersweet. Maria had spent 7 years at the Sterling Room. It had been hard work, often thankless work, but it had also taught her things. It had taught her patience, resilience, humility, how to read people, how to serve others. These were lessons she would carry with her. On her last night, after everyone had left and the restaurant was clean, Maria did something she had been thinking about for weeks. She sat down at the piano one more time. This time, she was not doing it out of impulse or desperation. She was doing it as a goodbye. She played Sakura Sakura slowly and gently. She played it for every difficult shift, every aching foot, every customer who had been rude, every bill she had struggled to pay. She played it for the hard years that had shaped her into who she was now. When she finished, she placed her hands in her lap and sat quietly. The restaurant was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen. "Thank you," Maria whispered to the piano, to the restaurant, to the part of her life that was ending. Then she stood up, collected her things, and walked out the door for the last time as an employee. Starting back at the conservatory in January was both wonderful and terrifying. Maria was now 27, older than most of the other students. Some of them were barely 20 years old. At first she felt out of place. She worried she had lost too much time, that her skills would not be as sharp as theirs. But her teachers quickly put those fears to rest. Yes, she had been away from formal training for 7 years, but she had gained something else. Life experience, depth, understanding of struggle and perseverance. Her piano professor, Dr. Martinez, told her after her first lesson, "There is a maturity in your playing now that was not there before. When you play sad pieces, there is real sadness. When you play joy, there is real joy. You have lived. That comes through in the music. Technical skill is important, but emotional truth is what separates good musicians from great ones." Maria threw herself into her studies with a passion she had never had before. This time she was not taking school for granted. She knew how precious this opportunity was. She knew what it had cost her to be here. Every practice session felt like a gift. Every lesson was valuable. She practiced 6, sometimes 8 hours a day. Her hands hurt. Her back hurt. But it was a good hurt. The hurt of working toward something meaningful. She made new friends among the students, though most were younger. They were curious about her story. Where had she been? Why had she left? Maria told them about her mother's illness, about working as a waitress, about the night that changed everything. Some of them could not imagine giving up music school to work a minimum wage job. But others understood. Everyone had their own struggles, their own sacrifices they had made or would have to make. There was one student, a cellist named David, who became a close friend. He was 25, closer to Maria's age than most of the others. He had also taken a detour in his musical journey, spending 3 years in the military before coming to music school. They often practiced in adjacent rooms and would take coffee breaks together. "We are the old people here," David would joke. "But we appreciate it more than these kids who came straight from high school." As the semester progressed, Maria began to find her voice as a musician in a new way. She started experimenting with improvisation, blending different musical styles together the way she had done that night at the restaurant. She played classical pieces but added elements of jazz, folk music from different cultures, even pop music. Some of her professors loved it. Others thought it was too unconventional. But Maria did not care. She was creating something that felt true to her experience of being someone who existed between different worlds. Her end-of-semester recital in May was a major event. Maria chose an unusual program. Instead of just playing standard classical repertoire, she played her own arrangements. She opened with Sakura Sakura, played traditionally at first, then gradually transforming into something more contemporary. She played Gershwin naturally. She played Chopin but added unexpected harmony changes. She even played a piece she had composed herself, inspired by her years as a waitress. She called it Invisible. The performance hall was packed. Her mother was there, healthy and smiling in the front row. Sophie came, taking time off from her nursing job. Dennis came looking uncomfortable in a suit that was not his work uniform. To Maria's complete surprise, Mr. Tanaka was there too. He had somehow heard about her recital and flew in from Tokyo specifically to attend. And sitting next to him was Mr. Whitmore. When Maria saw them in the audience, she almost could not believe it. These men who had started a billion-dollar company together, who were now business partners and friends, had come to hear her play. After the recital, which received a standing ovation, Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Whitmore came backstage to congratulate her. "You have grown so much as an artist," Mr. Tanaka said. "I can hear the depth in your playing, the authenticity." Mr. Whitmore handed her a business card. "Our merged company is doing extremely well, better than we ever imagined. We have been talking, Mr. Tanaka and I, about creating a foundation to support young artists, specifically artists who have faced hardship but persevered. We would like you to be one of our first scholarship recipients. Full funding for the rest of your degree, plus a stipend for living expenses." Maria stared at the card in her hand. She did not know what to say. These men kept changing her life. First with the $50,000, now with this. "I do not know what to say," she finally managed. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Mr. Tanaka smiled. "You changed our lives that night. You showed us something important. This is simply our way of saying that the ripples from that moment continue to spread outward." The next 2 years flew by. Maria graduated from the conservatory with honors. She won several competitions for her innovative style of blending different musical traditions. She was offered positions teaching piano, but she wanted to perform. She wanted to bring her music to people. She remembered what it felt like to be a waitress, invisible, struggling. She wanted to play for people like that, people who needed beauty in their lives but could not always afford concert tickets. She started doing free concerts in unexpected places, libraries, community centers, hospitals. She played in parks on summer evenings. She played in nursing homes for elderly people who could not leave their rooms. She played for children in schools that had cut their music programs. Everywhere she went, she told her story. About being a waitress. About a night when everything changed. About the power of music to bridge differences and heal wounds. Word spread about Maria and her unique approach to music. She was invited to perform at TEDx events where she talked about harmony, not just in music but in life. About how different things can come together and create something beautiful. About how you do not have to choose between taking care of others and following your dreams. About how sometimes you have to take detours, but the detours become part of your story, part of what makes your art meaningful. 3 years after graduating, Maria was invited to perform at a major event. The Whitmore Tanaka Foundation was celebrating its 5th anniversary. The merged company had become one of the most successful tech companies in the world, valued at over $10 billion. They credited their success to the culture of collaboration and mutual respect they had built, a culture that started with a lesson learned in a restaurant one October evening. The celebration was being held at a huge convention center. There would be hundreds of people there. Business leaders, politicians, artists, journalists. Maria was nervous. This was the biggest audience she had ever performed for, but Mr. Tanaka had specifically requested that she play. "You are the reason this foundation exists," he had told her. "You are the reason our company exists in its current form. We want to honor that." The night of the celebration, Maria arrived early. She wore a beautiful dress, deep blue like the night sky. Her mother had helped her pick it out. Her mother was there in the audience again, sitting with Maria's aunt. Sophie was there with her husband and their new baby. Dennis had retired from the Sterling Room but came out of retirement to attend. David, her cellist friend from school, was performing with her as part of a chamber ensemble. Backstage, Maria waited nervously. She could hear the crowd gathering. Hundreds of people. She peeked out from behind the curtain and saw the massive audience. Her stomach flipped. This was so different from playing in a small restaurant, or even in the conservatory performance hall. This was huge. What if she messed up? What if her hands shook? What if she forgot the music? Maria felt that familiar feeling, the one she had felt that night at the restaurant. She was not just playing notes. She was channeling something bigger than herself. All the pain of her difficult years, all the joy of her comeback, all the gratitude she felt for the second chance she had been given, all the love she had for her mother, for Sophie, for everyone who had supported her. It all poured through her fingers onto the keys. When she played the final note, the last gentle echo of Sakura fading away, the hall was silent. Complete silence. For a moment that seemed to last forever. Then the entire audience rose to their feet. The applause was like thunder. It rolled over her in waves. People were not just clapping politely. They were celebrating, cheering, some were crying. Maria stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. Mr. Whitmore came onto the stage with a microphone. He waited for the applause to die down. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. 7 years ago, Maria Chen was a waitress clearing tables at a restaurant where Mr. Tanaka and I were about to walk away from each other. Our merger was failing. 18 months of work was about to collapse. Then Maria sat down at a piano and played a piece of music that changed everything. He turned to look at Maria. She showed us that different things do not have to fight each other. They can dance together. They can make each other better. That lesson became the foundation of our company. It became the foundation of this foundation. We started to help young artists, and it became a reminder to all of us that sometimes the most important teachers come from unexpected places. Mr. Tanaka took the microphone next. "In my culture, we believe that everyone we meet is a teacher if we are wise enough to learn the lesson they have to offer. Maria taught us about true harmony, about what? About how to honor different traditions while creating something new. Tonight we want to honor her. Maria, would you please come here?" Maria walked over to where the two men stood. Mr. Tanaka held a large envelope. Inside this envelope is a grant from the Whitmore Tanaka Foundation. It is enough money to fund a year of concerts anywhere in the world you choose to perform. We want you to keep making music. Keep bringing people together. Keep teaching the lesson you taught us. Maria opened the envelope with shaking hands. The grant was for $200,000. She gasped. It was more money than she had ever imagined having. With this, she could tour. She could record an album. She could do all the things she had dreamed of but thought were impossible. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for seeing value in what I did that night." Mr. Whitmore smiled. "We did not just see value in what you did. We saw value in who you are, a person who faces hardship with grace, who sacrifices for others, who finds beauty even in difficult circumstances, who has the courage to break the rules when it matters. That is the kind of artist the world needs." The celebration continued for hours. Maria met dozens of people who wanted to talk to her, to shake her hand, to tell her how much her music had moved them. But the moment that meant the most was when she found her mother in the crowd. Her mother hugged her tight and whispered, "I am so proud of you. Not because you are famous or successful. I was already proud of you when you were a waitress working double shifts to take care of me. I am proud because you never lost who you are. You are still my Maria, just with more people who get to see how special you are." Sophie found her next and hugged her just as tight. "Remember when we used to fold napkins together in the back room and dream about better lives?" Sophie said. "Look at us now. You are a famous pianist. I am a nurse practitioner with my own practice. We made it." Maria laughed through happy tears. "We did make it. The long way around. But we made it." Even Dennis came over, looking uncomfortable with all the emotion but trying his best. "You know, I always told people I had a good eye for talent," he said gruffly. "I knew there was something special about you." Maria hugged him, surprising both of them. "Thank you for giving me a job when I needed one, for teaching me about hard work and discipline. I needed those lessons too." Over the next year, Maria used the grant to travel and perform. She played in concert halls, yes, but she also played in community centers and schools and churches. She played for refugees learning to build new lives in strange countries. She played for prisoners trying to find hope behind bars. She played for hospital patients fighting illness. Everywhere she went, she played her signature piece, the one that blended Sakura Sakura with Gershwin and other musical traditions. People called it Maria's Harmony. She also started teaching, not at a fancy conservatory, though she had offers. Instead, she started a program for young people who wanted to study music, but could not afford lessons. Students who were working jobs like she had worked, Students who had dreams but also had responsibilities. She taught them piano, yes, but she also taught them about perseverance, about making art out of hardship, about finding harmony in life. One of her first students was a young man named Carlos, who worked the night stocking shelves at a grocery store. He was 19 and had never had formal music lessons, but taught himself to play keyboard by watching videos online. Maria saw herself in him. That hunger, that talent struggling to break free. She gave him a full scholarship to her program. 3 years later, Carlos won a major piano competition and earned admission to a top music school. Maria recorded her first album. She called it The Waitress and the Piano. It was a collection of pieces that told her story through music. The album was not a huge commercial success, but it found its audience. People who had struggled, people who had given up dreams and found them again, people who understood that the path to where you want to go is rarely straight. The album won several awards for its innovative blending of musical styles. 5 years after that night at the foundation celebration, Maria received an email that made her cry. It was from a young woman in Japan who had heard Maria's story and her music. The woman wrote about how she had given up playing violin to work in her family's business after her father got sick. She had been miserable for years, thinking she had to choose between duty and dreams. Then she heard Maria's music and Maria's story. "You showed me that maybe I do not have to choose," the woman wrote. "Maybe I can find a way to do both. Thank you for giving me hope." Maria printed out that email and put it on her wall. This, she thought, was why she played music. Not for fame or money, though those things were nice. She played to remind people that beauty was possible even in hard times, that different things could come together in harmony, that giving up your dreams did not have to be forever, that sometimes a single moment of courage could change everything. On the 10-year anniversary of that October night when she had sat down at a piano in a restaurant, Maria organized a special concert. She invited everyone who had been part of her journey. Her mother, healthy and strong now, cancer-free for 8 years. Sophie and her family, Dennis, David the cellist. Her students, Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Whitmore, whose company now employed over 10,000 people and whose foundation had helped hundreds of young artists. The concert was held at the Sterling Room, which had been renovated but still had the same piano in the corner. Maria had arranged to rent the entire restaurant for the evening. She played for this small audience of people who mattered most to her. She played Sakura Sakura one more time. She played it with all the love and gratitude she had in her heart. When she finished, she did not stand up right away. She sat at the piano with her hands in her lap, looking around the room. 10 years ago, I sat at this exact piano, she said. I was a waitress who had given up on dreams. I was exhausted and hopeless, but I played anyway. I played because I had to, because something inside me was breaking open. I did not know that moment would change my life. I did not know it would change anyone's life. I just played. She looked at Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Whitmore. You two were about to walk away from each other. Now you have built something amazing together. Not just a company, but a model for how different people can work together with respect and creativity. She looked at her students. You are all learning that your struggles do not disqualify you from being artists. They make your art more real, more meaningful. She looked at her mother. Mom, you taught me what real sacrifice looks like, what real love looks like. Everything I am because of you. Finally, she looked at everyone together. This piano, this room, this moment 10 years ago. It taught me that we never really know which moments will matter, which small acts of courage will ripple outward and change things. All we can do is show up, be brave, create beauty when we can, trust that it matters even if we cannot see how. The room was quiet. Then her mother started to clap. Sophie joined her. Then everyone was clapping, but it was different from the thunderous applause at the foundation celebration. This was gentler, more intimate. The applause of people who really knew her, who had walked part of her journey with her. It meant more than any standing ovation from strangers. After the concert, everyone stayed for dinner. They ate and talked and laughed. Stories were shared, memories relived. Maria looked around the table at all these people whose lives had intersected with hers in meaningful ways.